Hi, welcome to the LSI Behind the Win podcast. For 50 years, the LSI team has dedicated themselves to the science of business development. We've seen the impact of our work and how it's evolved into economic development and now social impact work. I'm Lauren Lane, the Marketing and Communications Manager for LSI and one of the producers of this podcast. Thanks for joining us today. In this episode, Sean is joined by Brooke Staples to discuss how our team is assisting tribal and Native American entities capture federal funding and business development grants. Brooke is a talented grant writer, and she's been a member of our team for almost 2.5 years. We recorded this episode during the fall of 2020. If you have any questions about our work with tribal entities at the end of this episode, please email us at social@lsi1s.com. We'll also link it in the show notes. We'd love to stay in touch with you and answer any questions you might have. Thanks for joining us, and we hope you enjoy this episode.
I wanted to spend a session talking about our work with the Native American nations and some of the engagements that we've worked previously and have currently within the organization. And to facilitate some of this, I've asked Brooke Staples to join me this morning, and Brooke has been working with several Native American nations, and she is the engagement lead for several of our engagements as well, and is doing a great job for us. So just before we talk about some of the details of the engagements that you're leading and this work that we're doing with several Native American nations, give us some background on you and your history and anything you want the corporation to know about you.
Thank you. Thanks, John, for asking me to participate. And it's a pleasure and an honor to be here. I'll just introduce myself really quickly. As Sean mentioned, my name's Brooke Staples. I've lived here in Layton my entire life. I just recently moved back close to my parents, which they've got to love. I went to Weber State, graduated from Weber State back in 1999. I graduated in December 1999. I remember thinking Y2K was happening and the world's coming to an end right when I graduate. So I remember thinking about that. But I got a degree in English and communication, and then got a master's degree in writing. And as soon as I graduated from Utah State in writing, I went back to Weber and was hired as an adjunct. I still had young kids at the time, so that was a perfect combination for me. I would go and teach at night and be a mom during the day, but that eventually moved into a full-time position at Weber. And so I have been there for, it's pretty crazy, 17 years. Eventually moved into a full-time position. And I'm actually also working as the Director of Developmental English at Weber State, so I have some administrative responsibilities as well. I love it. I've been so grateful for that job and the opportunity to work with students. And I love school. I've always enjoyed school, and so it's been the perfect little environment for me. But my kids, they've grown up and left the house, and I found myself really feeling like I can either watch a lot of Netflix or do something else to fill my time. So I was talking, I don't know if Summer, who works at LSI, I was talking to Summer, and she said, we're always looking for grant writers. And I love to write. It's what I have studied and I have done. And so I talked to Sean, and he trusted me enough to give me a project, and I worked on it. And that was the first project that I did was an education grant. And that has just slowly morphed into multiple grants, different grants for different topics. I have realized how technical and difficult grant writing is and can be, but it's really made me flex my writing muscles and revisit some of the skills that I haven't practiced for a long time. So it's been just a really great opportunity. I've worked with LSI since January, and I've really enjoyed my time here. It's been a really great addition to my life. So thank you, Sean, for giving me the opportunity.
Thank you, Brooke. And as you mentioned, you're working with several accounts, including working as the engagement lead for DOCA. You've got a large team under you, and it's a complex engagement, and it's been an interesting 8-9 months working with them in this new structure. And so I've been asked by several members of our team to talk about our work with tribal entities and specifically our work with the Native American nations. So I'm going to talk a little about this history and how we got pulled into this, and give me just a minute to talk about our history, and then we'll do some back and forth on what you're doing now for a few of these nations. Not a lot of people understand this. I certainly didn't understand this concept of how the Native American nations are organized, and have had some really great mentors inside of several of the large Native American tribal entities, to the tribal governments, and then also there's really great executives inside of the Department of Interior that have given me this background and really taught me a lot about how these entities operate. What I was most surprised by is the structure. It was estimated that when Columbus came to North America, there were 300 to 400 Native Americans living across the United States. Today, there's about 4 million registered Native Americans, and only half of that population, 2 million Native Americans who are living on the nations. So that, I mean, that alone was just astounding to me, that there was this huge population of 300 to 400 million people in North America that has now dwindled to 4 million, and really 2 million living on a nation. So that I was shocked by that. Most of these nations are comprised of a small group. Think of, even though they are sovereign nations. So the other interesting piece of this is that each of these reservations or the nations are recognized by the United States as sovereign nations. So inside the United States, we have 400 sovereign nations comprised of Native Americans. And that's been an interesting dynamic with the policy of the United States. There are, just to give you some sense of what this looks like, there are several of the Native American nations that have applied for membership in the United Nations, and they have been issuing passports to their members. There's 400 sovereign nations that make up these various 2 million, this population of 2 million people. So think of this as it's about half the size of the population of the state of Utah. Half the population of the state of Utah lives on a Native American nation. Interestingly, there are some really large nations like the Navajo Nation, which is the largest nation and is comprised of about 500,000 people. So you can imagine there are a lot of these smaller tribes that are comprised of maybe 2,000-3,000 people. Today, the federal budget for funding the nations all funnels through the Department of Interior, which I think is a challenge. The Department of Interior, as many of you know, was set up to manage the lands. Underneath the Department of Interior are the organizations like the Bureau of Land Management and the National Park Service, and it's all, like the U.S. Forest Service, the lands are tied to the Department of Interior, and also the Bureau of Indian Affairs is under the Department of Interior. That's really a challenge. most of the funding that is being invested into the various nations is social impact, Department of Labor, Health and Human Services, even the Veteran Affairs. All of that funding goes through the Department of Interior, where the Bureau of Indian Affairs resides. And the reason that is the case, I mean, you're probably saying, well, why is that? Why is BIA under the Department of Interior? They have placed, the federal government placed BIA under the Department of Interior because all of the Native American reservations initially were held in trust for the nations. So meaning that the nations can't buy and sell their land. It is held in trust for future generations. So this is really an interesting dynamic. Several years ago, we had a connection inside the Department of Interior, an individual who had a long history of working inside of the Bureau of Indian Affairs, and he had heard about what we were doing with some of the Alaska Native nations, and he thought partnering with LSI, he could bring long-term economic prosperity to the Native American nations, and brought us in and had this idea that he said what had happened initially was he had been appointed to be the director of BIA, and he turned it down because he wanted to build an organization that was focused only on economic development and long-term prosperity for these various nations. And as part of his work early on, he brought us in and said, I've got this idea. Why don't we work with these various tribal entities where we can help them either provide funding for them for economic development initiatives, mostly, I mean, his interest then and still today is creating jobs and long-term wealth for the members of the nations. So he came up with this idea. He said, I'm going to put out an RFP. Any tribal entity can respond to this RFP, and then we'll look at the proposals that are submitted for these projects and then look at providing long-term funding. So he put this out, and we worked with him on this. He put it out. He didn't get any responses. So he had us and his team go back and work with these nations and say, we put out this RFP. How come you didn't respond? And you've got this opportunity to capture all of this business. Most of the nations said, we're such a small group, we don't have resources to do this. So he came back to us and said, what do you think we ought to do? And we suggested, what if you gave a grant to the tribal nations where they could apply for, they could tell you what the concept is and apply for a larger fund that they could then hire LSI or another entity to provide this work. And so that's been going on now for 7 years. We have won, I think, 7 or 8 of these Native American Business Development Initiative grants, and we call them NABD grants. And this has allowed a lot of, even like the Navajo Nation, which has a lot of resources and it's a large nation, to accomplish some great things. Like a few years ago, they implemented a broadband infrastructure throughout the nation, and have done some other really great things. So Brooke, you have been working with several nations over the last few months on this latest round of NABD grants. Why don't you talk about some of you've worked with a lot of different organizations now. Tell me what you've seen has been good and what has been challenging working with these Native American organizations.
So I do not claim to be a historian with Native American history, but I have always been really intrigued with this topic. So when I was going to school up at Utah State, a lot of what I studied was social justice. And we talked a lot about Native American populations. And so I've always been really drawn to this for years and years. And I guess when it really became quite impressionable to me is when I was driving. If you're familiar with Utah at all, I would have to drive up to Utah State up in Logan. And as I was going over the canyon in Brigham City, on the mountain, there is an eye. And for years and years, I could not figure out why in Brigham City, the mountain had an eye on it. So I searched it, and really what that eye stands for is the Intermountain Indian School that was there in the base of Brigham City for years and years. It's not there anymore. The structures have been taken down. But that was my first experience with just the rich Native American history in Utah. And I've studied it a little bit and become familiar with it. But I have had so much more experience with it in the last 6 months, as Sean has given me the opportunity to work some of these grants. So let me just give you a little background to one of the projects that I'm working. It's a company, a nonprofit organization called Fesora. They have a really incredible product. They have an online video tutorials that they have produced that they want to distribute out to school districts, so students who want to excel and graduate in STEM subjects can use these online tutorials to supplement their education. STEM, I mean, there's a lot of research that shows that STEM, we need more STEM students, but the enrollment is going down. So there's this conundrum, and this organization, Fesora, really wants to help supplement and implement this product. And so I've written a couple grants for them, and it's just so interesting because when I worked with Fesora, this COVID was just barely happening, and I have been able to watch our whole education system kind of change. And we're moving to this really strong online presence, and Fesora has been trying really hard to get their product out. They also not only have an amazing product, but they have a partnership with Verizon, where Verizon provides free hotspots, free internet service for students. It's an amazing partnership, and so they not only do they have this free product for people, but they also provide free internet service. So they came to me a few months ago, and they said, they've been trying to get into some rural populations, but with this COVID-19, they really wanted to focus on getting this product out into Native American populations. And I mean, it would be really, when I was reading about it, what I found out is that not only do a lot of Native American populations not even have access to educational tools, they don't even have the internet. So accessibility is a huge problem. They can't even really learn without the internet. And a lot of these populations don't even have access to the internet. So Fesora is trying to overcome that. So there really was not a better time for Fesora to really implement and have a relationship with some of these Native American populations. They really wanted to. Well, they have been working with the Wind River tribe up in Wyoming. That's where their pilot studies have been done. But long story short, it is not as easy as, I mean, in a perfect world, you would get this product out, students would be able to access it, they would have the internet. It would be amazing. But in order to even write the NABD grant and to have the product move forward with a feasibility study, you have to have a tribal resolution. And basically what that is a contract with LSI and the Native American population. You can't even pursue the opportunity without that in place. And initially, in my ignorance, thought, well, we'll just get these documents and then we'll be able to move forward and write these grants, and we'll be able to get all of this funding that's available, and it will just work out so well. And while I have had some success, it has proven to be quite a bit more challenging than I originally thought. Just for Fesora, for example, they're so anxious to do this, but I can't even, it's been a challenge just to even have the tribal council come together because they have to agree as the tribal council, and it's been really difficult to even get the tribal councils to come together. And granted, the COVID, they've been these populations have been very, very careful with COVID, and there have been some really unfortunate situations where it's just basically shut down. It has shut down a lot of these smaller populations.
So Brooke, one of the things that I didn't mention, but I think it is so important, that the structure of these nations is there's usually a chair, and then there's a tribal council. And for most of these nations, with the exception of a few of the large groups like Choctaw, Cherokee, and Navajo, most of them are, think of these organizations like a small town or a city where you've got a mayor, the tribal chair, and then this tribal council, which is like a city council. And even though you may have a population of 1,000, 2,000 members of this nation, that tribal chair is the leader of this sovereign nation in conjunction with the tribal council. And you're right, working with these tribal entities for so long, it can be a challenge to get the chair and the tribal council to agree to anything. Yeah,
it is really. I think in a perfect world, under normal, when we're not in a pandemic, it would be challenging, but it has even increased the difficult nature of it. But I've really enjoyed this opportunity and talking to some of these different tribal entities and the people that represent their group. And I have had some great success. A lot of the people that are representing, for example, I'm working on a grant for the Shoshone tribe here locally, and have had a lot of great success and communication. So it's not all difficult and all challenging. A lot of the representatives want to move things forward and progress, but I've also noticed that there's sort of a hesitant nature sometimes to these conversations, maybe even like a trust issue, just building trust that we are working to help. So there are initial difficulties to overcome, and I have been able to work through some of that. With this NABD grant, you have to have two basic elements. You have to have a tribal resolution, and the project has to be within an opportunity zone. And from my research, the opportunity zone has come kind of later here as of late. That's right. An entity that has been created over the last few years. And I can say that a lot of the tribal nations do not like the opportunity zones. They feel like it pushes them out even a little bit more. It's just one more hoop to have to jump through. And so when you approach them and you say, I need this contract, number one, and then number two, we need to see if your project exists in one of these opportunity zones, it's a lot of, they don't like it. So it's really interesting that in order to even pursue the funding, you have to have these two elements in place, which already get pushed back from the beginning.
So what's been interesting as we've worked several of these over the last 7 years, I guess, has been, it really is coming up with something creative that can develop jobs and equity for these tribal members. And we've worked a lot of projects that are creating a aerospace industrial park around an airport for a tribal nation. We worked a potato project. We've worked a project centered around a heritage center, and we're doing some interesting things now tied to depot logistics, and we worked a large strategy for, as I had mentioned, broadband and technology, bringing technology and various elements to these tribes. So it's really diverse. There's a lot of flexibility with these grants, and it's been interesting working with these nations and collaborating with them on strategy, working the capture and the proposal for them tied to these economic development and social impact initiatives. So, Brooke, is there, what questions do you have for me that I could answer?
So what I am so interested in, pleased and excited about with LSI is the progressive nature of LSI. And Sean, how you see the world. I'm actually so interested in how your brain works, and I've been able to see that the last few months. You're such a progressive, forward-thinking individual, and you see opportunity, I think, where other people may not, and you can strategize. And I just, LSI is successful because you have a vision and you have a personality and you have the expertise to do that. But I think a lot of people don't have that same mindset. And so I have seen sort of a gap between you and LSI and people that work within this industry and some of these Native American populations. Progression, economic development can be a little overwhelming and scary. They'll pull back because there's not a lot of forward thinking. So how would you propose to close that gap moving forward? How do we build these relationships where this growth can happen?
Well, I think a lot of this is the relationship where you have the opportunity to influence the leadership to make lasting change. And we've got a 50-year history behind us too, where we can talk about the results that we've achieved. And I've talked about this a few times now, but so much of our work is just being creative and seeing the potential that exists and then building a solution around this. That whole concept of solution development that we talk about internally, that's what it means, is understanding what the issue is and then being creative to build a solution around whatever the requirement might be. And so I think that's a big part of it, and showing some results. I mean, we've got so many great stories of these ideas that may have even started slow or small. We started with an engagement several years ago that was reviewing a document, and it was a very small task, which now has developed into a multi-million-dollar annual engagement for us that is tremendous. And that came about through the creativity of our team. Be creative, look for opportunities. That's a big part of it. So,
I just to end on that, whenever you write, whenever you create a document, you have to think about the story and the narrative and the audience. And I think writing for a NABD grant, thinking about the narrative is just, it's even more, it's emphasized even more for me through this process, because the Native American story is so strong. And so I think a lot of it is just making sure that I capture and tell the story accurately, because there's so much there that needs to be presented.
Brooke, thank you so much. Have a great weekend. Thank you, everyone.
John, thank you for giving me the opportunity. I've enjoyed it. Thank you.
Bye.
Have a good weekend. See ya.